I'm trying a new layout today. You can tell my camera's in a different position. I'm down in my quilting room, and I was going to, because we've got big stuff to show today, and I was going to experiment with this. So humor me. Let me make sure that you've got a good view of this here.
Good. What'd you do? Repaint down there?
No, I didn't repaint. This is the room that Ashma was using.
Yeah, I know.
So she's moved upstairs. Okay, so this is our quilt. This is the way it just came from the quilter. And so it's huge. And that's why I took this table and put it in the middle of the room. I've got it standing away from the wall because the quilt is bigger than the table. And I want to let it hang over the back of the table. Oh, good. She didn't cut it perfect.
Hello? Hello? Yeah.
Oh, this is the one you worked on with Betty. This is
Yes.
Boy.
This is the one that Betty did
Oh, yeah.
the stars, and I did the assembly.
Maybe. I don't know.
Now I'm ready to bind it. So this is the way it came from the quilter. And she used one of those long arm machines that we've looked at in pictures to do the quilting.
And he had called 7-8.
Whitney went with me once to visit the quilter that I often work with, Martha. And she has a 2-car garage, so we ended up with her long arm machine. So there. Now, what she did, and you can scarcely see it here because it's black thread on this predominantly black field, but you can see, if you can see the detail, there's a little design like that going around as she's quilting.
Oh, yeah.
Show it to you on the back so you can see it more clearly, but I think this complemented it very nicely on the front. And you remember when we were talking about it before, we said that she was going to use a different color in the back. And she called me and said, it's just not working out. Because remember, we were talking about tension one time. That, there, this is the back. The problem, if you try to use 2 different colors, is that when those 2 threads meet in the middle, you know, and they sort of hook onto each other, at that point, you're supposed to be right between the 2 layers. And if the tension is off at all, you'll see a little dot every time the thread comes up.
Interesting.
So here, so she said, we needed to use the same thread, and we talked about it on the phone, and we decided to use the black, which would be more beautiful on the front. And on the back, I think it also works. We talked about it, that it gives it more character.
Yep.
More design.
More accent.
Yeah. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So you see the pattern going around? I'm off camera.
No, it's beautiful.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous.
See how that comes on? So,
oh, yeah. That really works.
So you can see this pretty pattern. Yeah. And so on the back, it's nice to enjoy the pattern as well.
That seems a very complex pattern compared to the Lady in Dedham's machine, or not, maybe?
Well,
I don't know.
There are many, many patterns. This is called a pantograph pattern. So she has a guide that she's working with as she moves the head of her machine. And so this is the design that I chose. I wanted something that was more circles than points so that it wouldn't compete with the stars, but would complement them. And so this stitching holds the sandwich together. It makes the quilt stronger. And you remember, we've been ironing the seams all to one side. So when she goes across it like that, It's strengthening the seam.
Right.
But this has a sort of artistic touch to it that's different.
Oh, it's very classy. Very classy.
Okay, so we can go back to the other camera now. And we'll get the bigger view. Okay. So now our challenge is when I do the binding, I need a nice, firm, straight edge. But what I have right now is a ragged edge where all these pieces of the sandwich are coming together. Let me get that on the camera for you. So you see that? So you can see all three layers. Okay, so here I've got all three layers, the top, the batting, and the back. And I need to trim that to a nice, firm, straight edge so that I can cut it and bind it, sew against it. So how do I get a straight edge? So that's what I'm going to show you today. And that's why I have this big table and the big boards. And where's my shape cut? So I need to maneuver. This is a queen size quilt, so it's not an easy thing to maneuver. And you can imagine if I were trying to sew this on my sewing machine.
Forget about it.
Okay, so there's some extra here because it was bigger than the regular queen size cut of batting. So we had to get a king size cut of batting. And then there's a little extra, which I'll use for some other project. All right, so I'm laying it out nice and flat and nice and straight. And now I have this brown edge is going to be the edge of the quilt. And the rest of this is just extra. So we have a little extra on the back. They need it to be 4 inches wider on all sides in order to get it onto the machine and not have it go cockeyed. So I like to use my shape cut to do this part. And the reason for that is instead of worrying only about this edge, I can worry about this dimension. So I take this last border and I actually measure from here where the black meets the brown, not here. But so if I set that at 9 inches, then I'm an 1/8 of an inch from this edge. And I'm going to cut it there. And that way I'll have a nice straight line. Okay. So even sometimes the edges will wiggle a little bit as she's quilting. Sometimes it folds up or it separates a little bit. So I'm putting the 9-inch line there and cutting it on the edge. Doesn't matter what the number is as long as you do the same number of whole length. You see I'm just cutting that off. But you can see now why I need to have this nice and flat. And this cutting board is not long enough for the table. So I'm going to scoot it down so that it's under my blade. And the reason you want it under your blade is, first of all, because if I hit the table with my blade, it's going to damage the table and it's going to damage the blade. Okay, so now all my edges are neat and perfectly together. So when I go to sew against that, I'm going to get a perfect edge. And now, because the quilt is longer than the table, we're going to move this guy back up. You notice I close my blade so I don't accidentally cut myself or the material. This is interesting. I don't know if you can see it, but here you can see when she came to the end of this row and she had to go and start the next row, but there you can see the rows a little bit more clearly.
Mm.
All right, I'm on my green board. I'm cutting the next piece. I find this much easier than just dealing with
those.
so that even if it's like 7 inches between this and the next perceptible row, I can do 7 inches with this thing, whereas the big long ruler is only 6 inches wide.
It also helps keep everything square because you can put pressure on the plate.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're cutting, things don't pull and turn, twist. Yep, that's good. You got to get me one of those.
I can see the stitching on the brown material. Like it's really, really nice.
Good.
It really is. It looks very classic. Classic, yes.
I'm off the board. And it's harder to cut when you're off the board. There, got it. And I think I want to show you this corner, but I'll bring it down here. All right, so I finished one side.
Okay.
And now I have to turn the quilt. So you remember I said working the big quilt is a bit of a wrestling match. So yeah. So I'm wrestling the quilt.
That's why we go to the gym.
It should be a 2-person operation.
It is, but it is easier with 2 people, but I don't very often have 2 people to do this. But the main thing I need to do right now is make sure that I get it flat on the table and I get all the layers in the right direction. And I think I'll go to the other camera. Maybe you can see it better.
Ooh, yeah, that works.
How's that? Can we see this corner? Not quite.
Full count on that one.
How's that? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to cut this edge, but I wanted to show you how it works with this thing. Because as Whitney said, we want to keep it square.
Okay.
Right.
Do you have it unfolded where you are? So it looked like it was bunched up when you laid it out on the table.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I got some stuff. Good point. We need to make sure this is nice and flat and that the back is all pointing in the right direction. Okay. All right. So again, I'm going to do that same width, but because of the camera position, it's easier if I work with a different number here. I'm going to put it on 5 and I'm going to cut it again, the 3-inch width that we were using on the other side. And you can see how nice this lines up. Nope, you can't because I don't have the camera in the right position. How's that? Nope, wrong. I told you I'd never make a dentist.
Perfect.
Okay. So here we've got a nice straight line coming down on the side, and I want to make sure that it turns and it's nice and square. So again, by measuring from here, from where the brown and black meet, I'm going to get it more square. You can see that this brown and black lines up this way as well.
Mhm.
Okay. And so now when I slice it, and here I want you to see how the part that I nipped off is a tiny bit wider here at the end
Mhm.
than this part, but this distance is perfect. And that's what we're looking for. We don't really care about that. What we care about is that this is square. And it's much easier to do it with it because I have the guidelines and going in both directions with this gadget.
Great.
Now, what color are you going to bind the quilt? Are you going to use black or?
I could either use black or brown. What do you think?
I'll have to see.
Okay.
I like
Yeah.
brown because it will blend in with the beige. It looks beige to me.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, the other thing to think about is on the back.
It's a
The
turquoise.
binding here it's going to be against the brown. Here it's going to be against the blue. And I'm off camera. There you go. So here it's going to be against the blue. So, and we don't have to make that decision this moment. We can
Yeah.
decide that.
Didn't we use that fun app of yours to do that? We were playing with the colors.
Well, at this point, we can just lay it out on the table as far as that goes.
Right. You're the one who put all the work in too.
Well,
It's just so nice to see it come together.
yeah.
Very satisfying.
Like here's the black.
Ooh,
Can you see that?
I like the accents myself. I like to accent things.
Where's that green? Where's that brown? I had it laid out somewhere, but I don't see it this moment. Here's a bit of brown, or here's some brown. So, and on the front, of course, the brown is perfect. The black is a contrast. Now, if we look in the back, which one do we like better on the back?
I think I like the brown.
Yeah, I trust Claire's intuition.
Okay.
Classy artist.
Ladies know best.
Vote for the brown.
Shoving it down, checking the layers on the back, nice and flat. Yep.
Joyce, what do they call the instrument that you're cutting with?
This is a rotary cutter.
Rotary cutter?
Yeah, it's a little like a pizza cutter, only it's a razor. It's a razor blade.
Oh,
It's a round razor blade.
does that have to be sharpened every so often?
No, but I have to change it every so often, just like a razor blade you would.
Oh, I see.
So I have a supply of replacement blades. One or two quilts, and it'll need to be changed.
My mother used to do a lot of sewing, but she used to use the scissors and then rip the material. She said you don't have to cut it once you get it started. That's the old-fashioned way.
Yes, and there is some truth to that. There are people who rip, but not for all the precision work that you do. For some things it works fine. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be taking a course with a quilter by the name of Ricky Tim. And
You are? Ooh,
yeah.
Lucky.
In February. And I might be able to share some of it with you.
You better.
It's probably a little bit not the right thing to do.
It really does a good job, though, this,
Okay, so now I'm at a place where there's a lot of extra. You can see this white, that's the extra batting. So I'm just gonna cut it off just to make it more manageable. And this is the extra. So there's a good bit of batting there, and there's a nice piece of the blue too that I may decide to do something with. I could always cut it up and make pieces out of it.
Matching pillows.
Yeah.
that's an idea. What
So
do they
there's-
call those things?
and
You put it on the bed.
you can piece batting too. So I take extra pieces of batting and I put them together and I'll make a baby quilt. Put it in.
The colors blend in beautifully. The brown, the beige. Joyce, you should have been an artist.
Well, I always say this is my artistic outlet. It's paint by numbers, but the fabric is my paint.
Mm-hmm.
Now, years ago, if we couldn't find the colors we wanted, we would get Ritz dye, and we would dye the material.
Yes.
In.
Yeah, a lot of people do dye their own material.
Yeah.
You have to be careful when you do that, though, because sometimes the hand-dyed materials will run.
Yeah.
When I made that animal quilt that's hanging in the senior center, and I used a hand-dyed material for the pelt of the kangaroo. And when I washed out the water-soluble interfacing that I was using to do the paper piecing, the color ran.
Yeah.
So I wound up having to replace one of the pieces of material after I had washed it in hot water to try to make sure that it wouldn't do that again.
When you're using different materials, I always use cold water, and that way it preserves the color.
Yes, that's true to a certain extent, but the problem is if the garment's all one color, then as you say, you use the cold water. But in the case of this quilt, I had pieces of that brown next to pieces of yellow or something like that. And so my goal was I didn't want it to run into the other colors. In that case, you need to let it run as much as it's going to before you piece it. So that's why you use the hot water. I have a friend who loves reds, and she said whenever she brings reds home, she throws them immediately into the washing machine and washes them in hot water. If you want to run, this is the time. Do it now. They don't want it to run later.
And these materials, they look kind of delicate. Would you put it on a delicate cycle on the washing machine?
I throw all my quilts are completely washable because I believe in useful quilts, and I throw them in the washing machine. I have a big washing machine, not gigantic. If you have anything like king size, you might want to take it to the laundromat and use their humongous machines. But I do queen and full size quilts here all the time. I've done my son's king size quilts.
Joyce, you must have a lot of patience for what you're doing.
We can see now it's beginning to look like a real quilt and not with the raggedy edges. So we've got this nice perfect edge.
That's
And,
wonderful.
and the
You know, we come.
so the next step in binding is what? What do we need to do next?
Pin on pin.
Oh, I know what you showed us last week.
What?
The color that's gonna blend in.
Like binding it with another piece of material, which you showed us last week, folding it over.
Right. So if we're going to use the brown, I'll just set this aside here. All right, so here's the brown. And what I need to do now is cut for the binding. So what's the width we need for the binding? Who can tell me?
4 inches, 2 in front and 2 in back.
No,
1, 2 inches.
2 inches.
2 inches. Whoa.
I
Ah,
was going to say that at first. My teacher always say your first answer first.
No, I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut one. And I wanted to show you, I'm starting out, you know, how I do the fabric. So I have it all set and ready to go. But the edge was not quite the right. So what I did was first to trim off the edge to make a perfect edge. So this little bit was just to make the edge nice and straight. So now I have a 2-inch piece. And what you do with this is, first of all, we're going to extend it. And I won't do that on this camera, but in order to make the binding, you take a 2-inch strip, you fold it in half,
so that's
and you will press it. So this again is only, we're not going to see this much at the finished piece, Claire. So then I'm going to sew this. So we'll sew it right like that with all the raw edges together, the raw edges of this against the raw edges of the quilt. And then once I have that sewing line, I'll turn it on the sewing line and then fold it over. And that's the binding.
So the binding ends up being like a 1/2 inch.
Right.
Okay.
More like 3/8 actually. But anyway, so it's little. Because, you know, we started at 2, now it's 1. I'm going to sew that 1/4 inch line, so I have 3/4 of an inch left. And I turn it, and I turn it. So it winds up being about 3/8 of an inch wide. But it's nice and strong that way. You can see how many layers of fabric we have in there, because this is going to get more wear than any other piece of your quilt. So you want it to be really strong. So in each of these strips is about 44 inches. The quilt is a lot longer than that. So let's see how many we're going to need. I'm going to need 2.5 for each of the long sides and 2 for each of the short sides. So that means 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'll need 9 strips like that. I'll go ahead and cut 9. And you can see with this shape cut, it's really easy to do it. So I set it. And then every 2 inches, 1, 2, 3, 4.
What is so funny?
It's hard to talk about.
What? Oh, okay. So now I have 6 strips and I never even moved the ruler. So here I want to show you guys a trick. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking each one of these 7 strips and I'm opening them up and laying them down with the right sides up. All the right sides are up.
On top of each other, all the right sides up. Okay.
Right.
I'm
And-
doing that with you.
Okay, and now that's enough to show you right now. Let's see if I can get one of these lines. Yeah. So I have a line here that's a 45-degree angle. And I'm going to place this along the 45-degree angle. And then I'll use a straight edge. I'm not measuring anything. I just want a nice strong edge to work against. I set my straight edge along one of the vertical lines on the board and just go nip. And now you have all your diagonals cut for putting these together.
Oh, wow. Good trick.
But you just do them all up. That's the main trick. They have to all be up. If they're up and down, then you'll have trouble trying to put them together. But so that's scrap, and we'll do it for all.
It's like making your lasagna.
Yeah. Sure. So there I have 3 of the strips put together like that. Here comes 4, and that's about enough. You don't want to do too many layers. And you notice, you may be able to see it, there's some selvage here. So I want to make sure I cut off all the selvage.
I always hate to cut off selvage because the selvage is so straight already.
But it's bulkier. And this is where they turn when they're making the weaving. The thread comes down and then it has to turn and go back. So it's always a little bit tighter.
Oh,
So you do want to cut it off because it'll mess up your quilt.
okay.
You don't need all of these techniques, but they're nice to know about.
So this, the Gero, whatever we called it that we made.
Yes. Yes.
And here is my strip that I just did now with you.
Yes.
So do I cut it the same length as this, as the
Yes.
cut it here, where
Right.
I'm going to miter it, right here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Wait. Okay, and then you'll do the 2 opposite sides,
Okay,
top and the bottom,
okay,
and then you do the other sides.
okay, okay.
So here I wanted to show you, those things that I just pre-cut, now I can join them. You see?
Oh, yeah.
'Cause they all have the right angle.
Oh,
Okay, so I'll put them together like this, right sides together.
can't see what you're doing.
I know, I'm off camera. Hang on. Okay. Let's see if we can do it now.
Oh,
So
wow.
you lay them right sides together. Get
Wow.
that in a better position. There, that's better. No, I'm not used to the way the camera goes. Okay, so right sides together, and you notice it has this little rabbit ear on the end because you're going to sew from this point to this point. So it's right where they overlap because you want your 1/4 inch seam, and you'll sew from this notch to this notch.
Okay.
Okay, and that'll give you a perfect join, and then you press them, and now you've got this huge long piece of fabric. I press it so that the seams are all going in one direction, and then I fold it and press it. So again, all this is at the ironing board, and then I'm ready to start the binding.
Is that what
Okay.
you do for blankets too, Joyce? Is
Say
that
again.
what they do on a blanket?
Yes. Now, what,
Yeah.
let's go back to yours. Are you extending the sides or are you actually doing the binding at this point? When I'm doing the binding, I would go around it just all the way. I wouldn't cut it to the length. I would just.
Oh, okay.
So I make one huge long piece that will go the entire circumference of the quilt. So that's what I just cut here. And I'm going to put all those together so that I have one big long, it'll be 12, about 25 feet of 2-inch stuff. And then I'll just go around the whole circumference of the quilt.
Yeah, my fabric isn't that long, so I have like 2 of the, I'm gonna make 2 of these. And
Right.
I have to see how you're gonna manage going around. Okay.
Well, and that's exactly what I just did here, is to cut. I cut 7 of these strips, and I'm going to join them to make a piece that's long enough.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay. So yes, we almost never have enough in one piece to do it, but here I've created a piece that will be long enough to do it. And the reason you want this diagonal cut is when you fold it in half, you don't have one big lumpy seam across it. You sort of distribute the bulk of that seam.
That's what we do when we work with clay. You know, I work with clay, and we always do diagonal seams for better bond.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you guys, did it work okay for you to have me working at this big table?
I think this setup, Joyce, is excellent.
Oh, good. Thanks.
So easy to follow. I don't know where you have what else you have in that room. Do you have your machines up there?
No, my machine is in the other room. This is actually my bedroom, but I have the cutting table set up in here, and I just moved it out into the middle of the room so that I could let the quilt drape around a bit.
I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
See you all next week.
Okay.
Bye.